Hello, and welcome to episode 63 of All the Horrible Things. Well, this is the first time, I think, that we've gone back and discussed something that we've already discussed in detail, and that's the show From, because it had a end run of 3 episodes that we didn't get to talk about that was pretty badass. Where do you stand on it?
Yeah, I feel like... Wait, say that again. You liked it or no?
Yes, badass. I thought it was pretty good. Great. Pretty good relative to other episodes.
I completely agree, and I think that's exactly why it's worth going back to talk about, because I think it did something I think we were kind of assuming was going to happen. I didn't expect it to happen this soon, is to get sort of like a peek as to what might be going on. Although I will say, I'm not sure it's actually what we think it is.
I don't necessarily have theories yet. I'm very curious to hear your theory, assuming you're talking about the very end. But let's talk about what happens in the first part of this finale. I just find it interesting. We have characters kind of acting in ways that they didn't. If you remember this whole season, Kenny is kind of a bitch. You know, Kenny, his second, he's just like so moody. And then finale, he just simmers down so much and really takes second fiddle again to Boyd. I was surprised to see that come. It's not all that significant because Kenny, to me, is not all that significant of a character as a whole.
No, it's really interesting that he appears to be in a position of a main character and yet doesn't really do anything.
There's nothing of consequence that really surrounds him with the exception of his dad getting slaughtered by Sarah letting the monster eat, right? And I guess
it is the only thing.
The pseudo son.
Yes, agreed. It's the only thing that is a constant through line with his character, is that it's just referencing that his father was brutally slain. Yeah.
In fact, I think his mom is a much more dynamic character than he is, to be honest with you.
I agree.
And she has much less screen time. So, I mean, we're burying the lead here. Let's talk some of the big revelations.
Yeah.
Because Jade is finally growing on me. I know we talked about my disdain for this character a while ago, but he's getting some puzzle pieces, if you will. He had this whole puzzle piece monologue at the beginning. He's starting to put some stuff together and have a little bit of agency. One of my favorite moments in the entire finale was when he got to talk to dead Tom the bartender.
Yeah, it's really interesting that we have some of our main characters what would assume is a monologue because the dead people aren't really there. But the fact that these characters are having the same conversations raises questions. Are they really there? Are they projections that are... It's
Yeah, I think that's a big question. That's something I wanted to discuss with you a little more in deal. Do you think these dead characters are good or bad? Or you honestly... Because I just think it's interesting that we have certain characters that do talk to the dead people and other people don't, right?
Yes. Right.
Significantly, Boyd talks to his dead wife the moment before he crushes the music box, which does free the 3. So to me, he made the right choice, which makes me think that vision of his wife was probably bad, because she was all ominous about, if you do this, more worse things are going to happen.
Yes. And I was just going to say that character of the dead wife is almost a puppet of the town and is trying to sway a major character's decision. Now, if you go back to the bartender, he is also pushing towards a decision. He's saying you have to go down there, which is, it could be bad. He's putting him in harm's way. I mean, there might be answers, but they're not necessarily safe.
That is a very good point. Because as my old theory, I kind of still want to stick with it, especially if Jade is doing what these dead people want him to do. Because, bartender comes off like a really affable character. His wife, less so. He's very not trustworthy. But dead Tom, the bartender, I was kind of on board with them. They're joking about, you changed the still.
Yeah.
But he does send him down into the cave. where we have an amazing jump scare with that dummy again, the ventriloquist dummy, which has to have significance. We haven't really had any sort of explanation for that, right? Other than perhaps it's a metaphor for all these people got a hand up their butt controlling them, sort of thing.
Yeah,
right.
Right.
But that was a good jump scare. But then he goes into this cave where all of the Ngui children all laid out on slabs like they were maybe sacrificed there. It looked like a sacrificial spot to me. What did you make of him going down there and finding all the Ngui kids?
I think that's exactly what was going on as a sacrificial location. The question is, what does Ngui mean? And have you tried to look it up? Because it's not an actual word, but people have connected it to an old Celtic mythology word that means death, and which would sort of make sense if it was a sacrificial landing there.
Since you mentioned it, I've been looking up theories and all that about what's going on here, and you mentioned that Ngui, see, I didn't get that part, is a Celtic word derivative. Well, my friend, biggest theory out there, I'm not sure if you heard this, is specifically the monsters that come at night, not vampires, fairies. They are fairies, because in Gaelic lore, fairies come out at night, can be as ravenous as these ones, and you can save yourself from them by being inside at night. And then we recently watched some Irish movie where the fairies, or no, those were little goblin fairies. That was a different sort of thing.
Yeah.
But this seems really, really like a valid maybe basis of what is going on here as a whole, because there is this one specific fairy lore where the fairies are able to take people into their own world and then torment and torture them within their own world where they can't escape, essentially, which to me seems like right on the nose, Additionally, to support this, and this is something that I just realized I couldn't find on there. Maybe it's out there. But when I was trying to figure out what's going on with the bottle tree that Victor takes Tabitha to, that ultimately transports her to the lighthouse. First of all, I want to know what you think about the bottles, because I'm not quite sure about what's going on there. But just in general, what Victor calls these trees is faraway trees. Far away, fairy. It's very close words, the fairy trees. And when I think about fairies, I mean, it's even in my neighborhood, there's all these little houses at the base of trees where, they make it look like a little fairy village. And we even have a little fairy door in our place. And to me, this is the means in which fairies move around potentially, or, I get the only thing that's the catch there is the fairies supposedly can't get you in there, but we don't know that they can't go in. They just get shot out to a different spot, If you go in a fairy door, you're going to go into a random, unpredictable spot, but we don't know that those monsters can't go in there.
Well, correct. Although I will say the biggest difference between the bottle tree and other faraway trees is that it seems to have a direct link to the lighthouse. That's true. Somewhat consistently, right? I mean, if Victor is bringing her there, and it works, there's got to be a reason why it's
got to have to do with the bottles. It's been anchored in some way by these bottles that, I don't know, are some sort of conduit to the lighthouse. I mean, the reflecting light again. I don't know. But to me, the only difference then is that there's the bottles hanging from them. And maybe that has something to do with how it gets shot right to the lighthouse. Not sure.
And don't you?
I'm liking this fairy concept. I'm thinking it's really good.
It's super interesting, and it's very interesting. I had not heard any of that. I enjoy it because it doesn't seem to be, overdone within television. Certainly, maybe certain horror movies. But don't you associate bottles like that with messages?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I do.
And if
that makes me wonder, because there's another great moment in this finale where Boyd figures out to light the torch. Where did he get that torch again? That's something that kind of confused me. Where did he get this torch? What was the origin of
the torch? Well, the torch was what Boyd had found initially when he was first put into that dungeon or whatever you want to call it with the man on the wall. He actually found it there and was able to take it out with him.
Got it. So that makes sense when he lights it, because I've been playing a lot of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom lately. And to me, it was like figuring out one of these shrines. We're like, what do I got to do to get past this? Oh, yeah, light the torch. Right. And then boom. I did enjoy that. That was pretty fun, because then he goes there and then he destroys the music box. I did want to mention really quick, I feel like there's a lot of talk about how this is really, really reminiscent of Lost, and it's becoming more and more so Lost-esque. And apparently there are a lot of the same producers for Lost on this, which I hadn't known prior. And of course, you got Harold Perrineau in it as well.
Yeah, I mean, your fairy theory separates it from Lost for me, though. I mean, I understand that it's a similar story, and that this town is almost equivalent to an island in the middle of nowhere that you can't leave.
Right.
But I'd have to, I don't know.
Well, what I was mentioning that it has similarities to Lost, but what I wanted to mention, because we brought up the music box, was that it's also like reminiscent, especially in these latter episodes, of Nightmare on Elm Street, because suddenly you can't sleep. We never talked about that beforehand. So when you go to sleep, since he's brought back the worms or whatever, nightmares get manifested, right? Because you have the locusts that ultimately come out of that smiley-faced fairy, let's call them now, which is a fear of one of the other characters who has already passed, right? Was it the brother of Sarah who hated locusts, and now locusts have manifested in the town? Do you remember that?
Yeah, it was Sarah's brother. It was Sarah's brother. And as if someone's nightmare had come true. Although we see it, that whole storyline sort of leave as soon as the music box is broken and the locusts disappear.
Right. And with the whole Friday the 13th, not Friday the 13th, I'm sorry, Nightmare on Elm Street is what I hope I said that initially. Nightmare on Elm Street is what it is alluding to. Not only via you can't sleep, you're going to get killed in your sleep, but then you got this whole 1-2 Freddy's coming for you nursery rhyme sort of action when we have the three people who go into this coma state with the whited out eyes. And I got to say, the screams specifically of Marielle were blood-curdling to me. The screams of the two girls when they're getting phantom locust up the wazoo was pretty good. I felt like this one really brought the horror in a way the show hasn't been as effective as I've wanted it to be in the past. In this episode, it kind of brought it. But you're right. He breaks the music box. Everyone comes back into this world. We don't necessarily know where they were beyond having Boyd seen them in the caves, shackled up like he'd seen the old man, the old Marine. So is that to say that old man Marine is somewhere out there screaming similarly? Was he one of the previous three whose maybe body is still alive? I don't know. Or was still alive?
Yeah. I would think that because it's a place now that we know about, that maybe he's the lighthouse keeper.
Okay.
I mean, he might still be in that lighthouse because we didn't see the lighthouse itself is very interesting. But something I didn't want to forget was that there's that moment that they bring Sarah into the woods and she can still hear everything that's going on. She mentions the fact that they're laughing at Boyd, or it is laughing at Boyd. There's some still strange reason that Sarah can communicate with them and no one else really can.
Sarah can communicate with them, and additionally, the one fear that's manifested is her brother, so it has something to do with their bloodline, that they're tied to this place in a way that others aren't. And of course, she's one of the other three people that can see the dead people potentially. But that's another theory I want to bring up that I found on here, was the boy in white. We have talked about, if I recall, Elgin potentially being Ellis and Fatima's baby, right? There's the potential for I think we had discussed that one already. I found that out there. Other people are on board with that potentiality. But what I hadn't seen is the boy in white is potentially Tabitha and Jim's dead son, Thomas, the baby who rolled off the changing table. And maybe that's their kid older. Hadn't heard of that before. Maybe not. I'm not sure, because you do have their son is one of the few people that can see the boy in white. It's just their actual son who survived, Victor and Sarah, that can see this boy in white. And he is the one ultimately, and we haven't even mentioned it, who pushes Tabitha out of the lighthouse. And he's apologetic about it. Yes. He's very sweet about it. I wish I didn't have to do this, but right out the window.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting theory. I don't know if I buy into. I don't like it because he would be aging still as a child, and I don't think that. Okay. I don't know.
That's fair. There's another thing out there that this is all about Jim, and that this is experimental psychotherapy for Jim, and that's why it could potentially be his son aged in Jim's mind. This is getting a little too out there for me. That one I'm not really. Yeah. Because Jim does not. It's such an ensemble cast. Why is it about Jim when Boyd's really our lead?
Now, I haven't dug too far into online theories, but I did see one that was more meaningful because something it almost reinforced something that when two cars show up, that's when something is triggered and things started to change, and that's what happened on day one to right. So I mean, the bus doesn't necessarily do anything for me then, but the two cars might have some sort of connection to how things have just started changing. And the other thing that they're trying to connect it to, these moments, and you see it in the lighthouse briefly, I don't know if you caught this, but when she's walking up the stairs, one of the steps has a bunch of different years carved into it. Did you see that?
No, I did not see that. Wow. And
these are years that span from like, there was like a 1503, there was a 17 something, 1888, and it's like these moments that are jumped out. Like, so this quote unquote evil, I'm trying to connect this back to the fairies because the fairies have been around, forever. Yeah. So it would reinforce that, but they're saying that these years that are carved in there are when like two cars have shown up. Obviously, that doesn't make sense for the late 1800s or anything before that. It's got to be two vessels, two vehicles. That one sort of jumped out at me, and it makes me kind of want to just like go back and rewatch.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I did not see the years, so I can't really posit much on that. It's got me thinking back to last week's about the alien invasion stuff, because people are now, the theory there in the subreddits is all that these UFOs are future humans that essentially don't want it to come out, because if we then found out that as future humans able to try and it's going to change the timeline now, Terminator style, right? So the time stuff is very interesting. Up till I guess this point, we had only really considered Victor's period, and that maybe potentially having some sort of overlap. But if you're talking about the 1500s atop that, I'm at a loss. That's what I'm going to have to think about further.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about really quick Victor's mom and sister. So we know that Victor's mom didn't make it, but did his sister make it? Because he found his mom's body near the tree. Could his sister have gotten out through
that's a good point.
Palm tree?
That's very
and possible. That connects
because wouldn't the mom have sent the kid through before her?
Yes, like push her through or whatever to. Yeah. Now the thing that really starts to make me think though is this hospital. And yes, we're gonna jump to the very end here because it would mean that the daughter may have Victor's sister may have gotten out. Is she still in this place? Will we see her in season 3? Did you happen to catch the name of the hospital?
St. Anthony's, was it? Am I crazy?
Yes, and St. Anthony is the patron saint of lost and stolen things.
Oh,
so
fine. All right.
Yeah. could this hospital still be part of it? You know?
Yeah.
Did she really get out, or is it just a different level?
Because she's all cut up. She clearly went through glass, so this wasn't something that just happened in her head, because when she wakes up...
Right. And they say that 3 hikers found her outside in the woods.
Who are these hikers?
It makes you... Who are these hikers? How they said, like, it was 3 days before they brought her to the... Or that she has been in the hospital, so 3 days ago. So does time stop within this town, even though Victor ages? Does it change? You know, like, does it move at a different...
Right. Well, that being said, it does clearly, because I went back and I was trying to figure out, okay, is this in olden times or something? But they have new hospital electronic equipment. You know what I mean? So it's definitely contemporary. So I'm thinking for season 3, are we going to have then Tabitha and maybe then Victor's sister, if she gets integrated in there, trying to find their way back?
You would think so, because you can't just leave your family. You've got to find the tree in the road, right? You've got to get back.
And what happens when Victor goes back and tells Jim and company, yeah, I sent her through the tree, and then they, of course, are going to follow and then potentially find her dead body outside of it. How's that? Yeah, I don't know. I love the mysteries here. I will say this last finale has got me more intrigued by the show. I still got to give it a little bit of criticism, because I do think there are painfully slow parts of the show as a whole. You know, there are moments that just seem superfluous. Can I mention a couple other theories that are out there? Because one of them, again, aligns with what I've said before on my own, and that's that Tilly is a plant. The old woman is a plant. That is out there officially. She's the one that brings the morphine that kind of like dangles it right in front of Mariel, right? She knows that Fatima is pregnant somehow. And she does the weird rain dance, the only one that doesn't seem, you know, affected by their circumstances. A couple other ones really quick, that all the characters are potentially dead in a coma. I don't like it. It's too easy. That's what a lot of people said about Lost when it first came out. Something significant with water. There is a consensus online that the woman that was holding down Elgin in the water was a mummified Fatima. And if the theory that it is her kid, maybe it's not something that is ominous. Maybe Fatima, in this mummified state or whatever the hell, the old whatever time period she's coming from or dimension she's coming from, is trying to give him a message that you escape through water. Water supposedly might have some additional significance. And as we talked about with the lighthouse being by the water, but essentially that's Fatima trying to give him a clue instead of trying to scare him. I don't know. I'm not sure about the whole water business. Oh, yeah, the symbol that Jade is obsessed with, you know, this like...
I was going to bring that up,
is potentially a map of the town. And like you said, what if the hospital town is still in there? What if it's like another town that's like this too? We don't know that this is back in the real world at all. You're absolutely right. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say it is interesting though that they allowed us to get a peek out of the window, and Tabitha, when she wakes up, she pulls the curtain back, and it looks, in my opinion, like the Northeast, like somewhere in Maine, which, you know, a lighthouse would be. So I don't know. Those are all interesting. It's weird to me that Jade looked up and saw that symbol and then it wasn't there. But you always sees them in the cave. Well, sorry, that's what Tabitha said. They're written all over inside the cave. But I also thought it was pretty great that he, you know, brought that spool of yarn with him. He's a smart guy.
I was waiting for him to get yanked, honestly. It just seemed like it was going to get yanked.
I'm waiting for it to be like cut or something when he tries to find his way out, because we don't see him leave the cave, correct?
Right. And if you remember from our first discussion I am very dubious of Jade. I think he's going to be the one that's turned into something that's evil, and to me this only supports that, because he's listening to the dead people. He sees the dummy. Maybe he's now the dummy. He's the new Sarah, the one being manipulated. And this is more of an evil symbol than, you know, a map or whatever. I don't know. I still think Jade is going to become our big problem, because we didn't discuss Randall. Randall, you know, has his really super dickish episode prior where he almost kills Donna. But what if he's right? What if Randall is actually right? I mean, that is a possibility.
Yeah.
When we see him wake up in bed, we don't know what happens to Randall after that. So I'm curious where his storyline goes. Well, let's wrap this one up with one last theory here, which I found very interesting. That kind of parallels, because if you remember, Henry, the kid, is obsessed with this fairy tale that he keeps reading with his dad and this whole family about the Crom Knuckle, right? And this lonely dragon. Well, there's a theory out there that suggests allegorically Tabitha is the Crom Knuckle, because in this Crom Knuckle book, this Crom Knuckle's given a map by the lonely dragon to escape. And ultimately, the lonely dragon, being Victor, gives her this map to the tree, his drawings or whatever, and then she is able to escape in a sense. But I like how there's potentially that additional layer going on, and it does give potentially more significance to Henry's character than we really ever talk about.
Right.
Because it's hard to give a shit about Henry.
But yeah, you could also argue that the little ghost boy could be the dragon. He's,
that's
slowly. Yeah.
Nevertheless, we have a long time to wait before season 3, but it was good enough latter half of the season to come back and discuss. And I'm looking forward to it.
Yes.
I hope they bring in
certainly
really fun new actors and characters too. I think maybe its success will bring a nice little, jolt casting-wise.
Yeah, you could argue that to the two vehicle theory, that Victor's sister and Tabitha could both try to get back. They could show up to the tree and then be two new vehicles that show up, triggering something else. So it was a really, really fun cliffhanger, and it's one of those dangerous cliffhangers. Like, I don't know what the ratings are on this show. I think it's great, but it kind of reminded me, this is funny, of Archive 81 when he wakes up in that.
What I thought as well.
Oh, man.
100%. We're going to get Archive 51 here. I don't think so, only because MGM Plus doesn't have a lot of content, and I think there's a buzz about this out of nowhere because of season 2.
Yeah. I think so too.
I'm hopeful. I think we'll at least get a third season, even if they tell them this is your last season, wrap it up. They'll do it up. Well, there was one flaw with this episode that just drove me crazy, and this goes back to I want them to bring in better cast. The Reggie character, whose poor, I guess it was his girlfriend, is the first one gutted by the Freddy Krueger.
Right.
This Reggie guy, man. He was a little too much for me, and especially in the first episode where he's just kind of breaking down, going crazy that they lock him up. But then when they do release him, he goes and he slits the throat of the one character who really didn't deserve it at all, grabs the gun, and then wants to kill Boyd because he thinks Boyd's the one behind all of it. It just seemed ridiculous to me. Like, that was the only part of the episode that's stupid.
Yeah, also something to be reminded of, that Boyd did get shot in the arm with a shotgun, like it's so scattered. So it's kind of another interesting thing where he could be, dripping that blood. So who knows? I don't know if it's completely out of his system.
It does seem like there's healing aspects to this place too, because I don't know how Alice is back in business as fast as he was either.
Oh, seriously.
Let's not forget that Carl's back on the loose. They let Carl out to try and find Randall. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with Aqua Teen Hunger Force, but there's a Carl in that.
Oh, yes.
He's a spinning.
Oh, yeah.
That Carl. But that's it. That's all I got for this one.
That's great. Yeah, we will definitely keep our eyes out for season 3.
Yes, and until then, stay alive, people.
Stay alive.